with the integrity of the Justice Department. On the line, let's bring in MS Now legal analyst and former clerk to Judge Sonia Sotomayor, Melissa Murray, former federal prosecutor Brendan Ballou, who tried January 6th cases, and MS Now senior investigative reporter Carol Leonnig. I am confused by the timing here. Carol Leonnig, Todd Blanche already has a rocky confirmation process. Why throw this loyalty test into the mix?
Well, one of the things that Todd Blanche learned upon being named acting Attorney General when Donald Trump fired his first choice, Pam Bondi, was that as soon as he fast-tracked weaponized political investigations, Donald Trump was pretty excited about nominating him to take the job permanently. And so I think for Todd Blanche, having the chance to indict Jack Smith, the former special prosecutor who brought two pretty powerful cases against Donald Trump involving classified documents and an effort to obstruct and block the certification of the election. The idea of pleasing Donald Trump in that way would only further help his standing with the president. I don't think there are a lot of members of Congress, actually, that are angry about the idea of Jack Smith being tarred and feathered publicly either. It's a different set of questions than, for example, what Senator Tillis or Senator Cornyn have asked. What's just really shocking here, Alicia, is that Jim Jordan believes there is strong evidence that appears to indicate a crime. We all read the English language. We all know what Jack Smith was asked, and he answered it accurately. I mean, I wrote a whole chapter of a book about this, and his answer about the actual toll records is pristinely correct.
Brendan, I remember talking to folks on the committee at the time that they were interviewing Smith about why Republicans wanted this done behind closed doors. One, because they wanted to suss out what Jack Smith was going to say so they could decide what was politically damaging to them versus what was politically advantageous. Even Dems would concede that was smart strategy at the time, but also because they wanted the possibility of setting traps for him, of having testimony that had gaps, that had discrepancies. But in this case, do the merits even matter here? Does DOJ go forward with it regardless?
It's tough to say. Obviously, as Carol was saying, the acting attorney general has a strong incentive to try to bring an indictment here. It seems crucial to his relationship with the president and his advancement professionally. But it's a tough case to bring. It's pretty clear that Jack Smith was truthful in his testimony. He was asked if the search warrant sought the contents of members of Congress's communications and their cell phones. He said that they didn't, and they didn't. The fact that these same communications were available in the National Archives, I think, as Representative Jamie Raskin has pointed out, is frankly something of an embarrassing surprise to members of Congress. And so at some level, they might be reacting to their own sort of shock at this. It might be possible for the administration to secure an indictment here, if you sort of frame this up in enough legalese and, try to sort of obfuscate what the question was, maybe they can secure an indictment. But even there, if this is brought in the District of Columbia, where it almost certainly would have to be, grand juries have been incredibly skeptical of this Department of Justice, so they might even struggle there. But even if they did get an indictment, this is, it's just so obvious that Jack Smith was telling the truth and answering the question. This might not even get to a trial or to a plea because it could just get dismissed on a motion to dismiss. The judge could just say on their own initiative that there's not enough evidence to bring a case here. So I think it would be, it's possible for them to bring a case. I think it's almost impossible for them to win.
Right. I mean, Melissa Murray, what we've seen over and over again is that the outcome seems sort of secondary to those pursuing these cases. The pain of the process is the whole point. I want to read to you just a little bit more of Smith's team's response. They say this referral, quote, relies on the unprecedented theory that Mr. Smith provided false testimony, not because of what he said, but because of what he did not say. Specifically, the referral argues that by not proactively disclosing that the special counsel's office collected from the National Archives records from White House phones that included text messages, Mr. Smith violated the federal false statements statute. That's a lot of legalese there. I want you to unpack it for me. My understanding is you have Congressman Jordan saying Smith lied by omission, and you have Smith's team saying, no, the lawmakers asked the wrong questions.
I mean, that's basically it in a nutshell. You cannot provide a false statement to a question that has not been directly asked in the way that Mr. Smith's lawyers are saying. And so he's provided information for the questions that were asked, and he's done so under oath. And, to Carol's point, he answered correctly. And so there's that. Could I go back, though, and just maybe add a little more legal color to the whole question of what's in it for Todd Blanche? Todd Blanche, who has been auditioning to be the AG for some time now, can serve in this capacity under the Federal Vacancies Act as long as his nomination is pending. He has a 210-day service that he could elapse unless the nomination has been brought to the Senate. It has been brought to the Senate, which means the time frame for the Vacancy Act is tolled, which means as long as he is still the nominee and it's pending before the Senate, even if the Senate doesn't take it up and vote on it, as long as it's not withdrawn by the president and the Senate doesn't vote on it, he can serve indefinitely. The period is tolled at this point. And so that really underscores the point that Todd Blanche is playing and performing for an audience of one. And that one audience has one thing in mind, and it's retribution. So it's not surprising that this was teed up for Todd Blanche. It also, I think, conveniently provides cover for people like Thom Tillis and John Cornyn, who have expressed some doubts about Blanche's nomination. This is a huge distraction. And if they vote for him, a lot of this may go under the water as we focus on the DOJ prosecuting Jack Smith.
Right. I mean, because, Carol, let's not lose sight of what these records were about. People were potentially communicating about how to overturn an election. This wasn't a fishing expedition.
Absolutely correct. I'm glad you brought up that point, because I remember when Senator Grassley sort of famously several months ago, quote unquote, released this amazing explosive information suggesting that the toll records, well, first suggesting that members of Congress had been spied on because their toll records were sought, which is something that happens multiple times a day at the Department of Justice's instruction when they're investigating something and trying to find out who called who, when did they call them. You don't learn the content of those phone calls. You're just learning, who called who. It happened to be absolutely essential to learn who Donald Trump was calling on the day of January 6th when he was refusing his staff's entreaties, including his White House counsel, including several of his deputies, including his chief of staff, entreaties for him to do something to stop the violence that his supporters were basically executing at the Capitol to try to block the certification of a free and fair election. Those phone calls were overwhelmingly to Republicans. No shock there. But when this was released by Senator Grassley as some great smoking gun about the corruption of Special Counsel Jack Smith's investigation, nothing could have been further from the truth. Republicans' toll records were gathered because Donald Trump called Republicans. It's not really a surprise.
To your point about this not being a surprise, Jack Smith has said he thought a prosecution could be coming with or without this referral. I want you all to take a listen to him on with Nicole Wallace earlier this month.
Do you expect to be indicted?
Listen, Donald Trump has made a bunch of statements.
He said he would indict you, yes.
I'll tell you, Nicole, I honestly do not spend a lot of time thinking about the things he says about me and his threats about me. I'm real focused on the people who I worked with, looking out for them. I'm real focused on how the Justice Department's going to be better going forward.
Are you afraid to be speaking out?
No, not at all. I am not going to be intimidated. And there's no way in the world, if the thought was to go after me so that I wouldn't speak up about the corruption that's happening or speak up to defend these agents and prosecutors, that is a grave miscalculation.
Brendan, prosecutors usually try to let the work speak for itself. Is that an option anymore? Do people like Smith now have to make the case publicly in this new political reality?
Well, I certainly hope that they do. Jack Smith carries an enormous amount of credibility, both in the public and, among lawyers. So I hope that he uses this opportunity to speak out more. And I think it will be obviously a necessity, if he in fact gets indicted. I also think it's a necessity, whether or not he goes in the media, that he go on the offensive legally here. This would obviously be ripe for a motion for selective or vindictive prosecution. And the idea that he's being prosecuted because of his beliefs or, his allegiances, not because of any crime that he committed. That idea of selective or vindictive prosecution is ultimately derives from the constitutional right to equal protection and due process. And, his constitutional rights are arguably being violated here. I hope that his lawyers think about bringing an offensive case if he is indicted for a constitutional violation for which he can get injunction, for which he can get damages. And I think that will help shift the narrative, too.
Melissa, I understand the question I am going to ask maybe sounds naive or quaint, but Todd Blanche was Donald Trump's lawyer in the Jack Smith case. Does that require then a responsibility to recuse himself from this case at DOJ?
I think in ordinary times, most lawyers, to be cautious, would, one, surface the association with the earlier litigation and then attempt to recuse or to seek advice or counsel about whether or not to recuse. But I don't think we are in ordinary times. And I think it's unlikely that Todd Blanche is going to do that. We already saw Todd Blanche last week talk about the fact that he is Donald Trump's personal lawyer. Hard to say. And I think given the nature of the association and the person who has been his client may continue to be his client, I think it's unlikely that we're going to see the kinds of steps we ordinarily might see.